Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome back to our main stage. I hope everybody enjoyed the breakouts. My name is Fatima Salman, as it says in my little thing on the bottom. I am the current NASW Michigan president. I am happy to be with all of you here today. This has been a fantastic conference. The chats have been alive. The comments and the conversation has been wonderful, fruitful, full of diverse opinions, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out, first of all, to all the people that helped plan all of this, our stellar staff at NASW Michigan. As always, they're amazing, and the program has been just fantastic. In the previous video, we talked about he talked about how social work is political. Social work is advocacy, and social workers are part of that. We are political. We are advocates. We are change makers. We are change makers, and I think that everybody has to remember that sometimes when we're in our everyday, day-to-day work as social workers, don't forget that you are making a ripple with, even if it's a tiny pebble into that huge ocean. And that's what we're doing. We're changing the world one person at a time, one client at a time, one organization at a time, one community at a time. And that arc will continue to change for good and for social justice. So I just want to remind everybody that thanks for coming. Reminders of why we're here, why we do what we do, what is our why as social workers. Whether your passion is reproductive justice, whether your passion is economic justice, whatever it is that brought you to today, keep on doing it. Keep on being that change maker in your local community, and thank you for being a part of NASW Michigan. We appreciate that. We hope that you can continue to join us in our events. I'd love to put in a plug saying join NASW, renew your membership in October or November. And for those who do renew their membership or join, you can get a $100 gift card or one complimentary registration to our 2023 Meeting of the Professions Conference in May. Stay involved, keep involved with your regional reps, reach out to me or reach out to Dwayne. Let us know what you want to see in this organization. This is a membership-based organization. That means that I am serving all of you. So let us know how we can best help you in your everyday social work profession, in your advocacy, in your passions. Let us know. So thank you, everybody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Merissa Kovach. I'm the Legislative Director at the ACLU of Michigan, and I have the honor of moderating this final keynote panel on voting rights in Michigan. So we have a jam-packed panel of some really great advocates who are going to be spending the next hour with you. So I'm going to jump right to it and introduce Rochelle Rubin with Voters Not Politicians. She has a presentation to share with all of you on Proposal 2, which is on the ballot this November. So Rochelle, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen right now, I hope. Let's see. Present, share screen. Just got taught how to do this. Look at that. And you can hopefully all see my screen now. I hope. Yes, I can see it, so we're good. Okay, so I have been with Voters Not Politicians for a long time. As a volunteer for Voters Not Politicians, I have been
Hi, Rochelle. I believe you muted your microphone.
right here. I found it.
There we go. We can hear you.
Now you can hear me? Fantastic. Let's start over. Okay. Again, I have been a volunteer with Voters Not Politicians for quite a long time, starting back when we were working on the whole gerrymandering problem, because we really believe that everyone should have a voice. Everyone should have a voice in what we're doing, and that all people should have safe and secure voting. So that's one of the reasons we are working on getting Prop 2 again, passed in this upcoming election. So what I want to do today is explain to you why I'm so passionate about getting this passed and why I believe it's really important that everyone not only vote for Prop 2, but also encourage everyone that you know and try to spread the word. And if you have any ability to help us with this, that would be fantastic as well. So again, why do I support this? Yes. Well, first of all, just a little bit of background information. Some of you may or may not have heard about the Secure My Vote petition that was going around, but just a little bit of background. There's an organization called the Heritage Foundation, and what it was doing, it was going all over the state and the country, trying to promote legislation that would limit voter accessibility, voter opportunity to have safe and secure elections. And so they were putting putting out legislation to all the different states to be put forward, and including in Michigan. And in Michigan, in March of 2021, 39 bills were introduced by our legislature in Michigan that would limit voting rights in one way or another. 2 of those passed, and our governor vetoed both of them. So we were protected from the Heritage Foundation's influence on our state and attempt to really limit our voting rights. However, we now have in Michigan, and I didn't even know about this. My husband told me about it, and I told him I thought he was maybe crazy because it didn't sound like it was something that anybody would have. But Michigan, one of the only states, it may be the only state, has what's called a statutory ballot initiative that can be initiated by a group. And if you initiate that ballot proposal, all you need is 350,000 signatures, which is like less than 4% of our voting population, for it to go to the legislature, directly to the legislature. We do not get to vote on it. And if the legislature passes it, the governor would not be able to veto it. So this is a really dangerous option because really very few people in the state, very small percentage of the voting population would be able to determine who could and could not vote and whether or not they would have accessibility. So because of that, we decided that the only way to work on that was to develop a constitutional amendment in Michigan that would prevent anyone from starting to tamper with our voting rights. And so that's what this ballot initiative is. So basically, we really need to promote this and to explain to people that it's really there to protect what we have and really to expand accessibility as well. So in 2018, we passed Proposal 3. And Proposal 3, and then I like to think of like Proposal 2 as a booster shot for the vaccine. We had this disease going around where everybody wanted to limit voting. And so we came up with Proposal 3, which gave us all kinds of wonderful opportunities to make voting more accessible. For example, the no reason absentee voting, which basically meant that you didn't have to lie to get an absentee ballot, but you could have one if you just thought it was going to be difficult to get to the polls. It expanded opportunities for voter registration. It gave us back our right to have straight ballot voting, which prevented a lot of ballots from being invalidated because people couldn't understand exactly how to go through and vote them one office at a time. And so all those things we had right now as of 2018. But what then we found is that people were now starting to try to sort of find ways to manipulate that system so they could still limit voting accessibility. So in this constitutional amendment, there are a number of pieces that would prevent the limitation of accessibility and also improve what we already have. So that's why I think of it as a booster shot. It protects and it improves our rights to vote. So one of the first is it's going to say that we have the right to vote without any harassment. And that would include harassment at the polls. And from what I understand, people are now talking about harassing people at ballot boxes, secure ballot boxes. I've heard in the news that in some states they're talking about showing up with guns. I told my husband, all you have to do is put that in the news, and that already becomes an intimidation to people to actually go out and cast their ballots. But this is going to say that you cannot harass people by law or by action. Right now, our military and overseas ballots have to arrive by election day. And that's, I don't know about how about your mail system or post system, but for me, there are many days that I don't get mail for 2 or 3 days. And I actually, as I was canvassing, met one woman who didn't get mail sometimes for 2 weeks without calling. So we don't want to depend on the mail system for our ballots to arrive. So for now, if this amendment passes, then it would mean that if the ballots are postmarked by election day, then they would still be valid to be counted. In addition, we are protecting what we have is a very secure voter identification system. Right now, the law says that you have to bring a picture ID, and if you don't have a picture ID, you have to sign a sworn affidavit that would then be checked and monitored in terms of signature. And then you would be able to vote. A lot of people say we don't have a safe and secure system, but we actually have one of the best in the country. And we want to protect that and not allow people to start to manipulate that system as well, which is what Secure My Vote did want to do. They wanted to take away the affidavit and make it a provisional ballot, which would have meant that in order for your vote to count, you would have to then show up at the clerk's office within 6 days or your vote would not count at all. So it just made another roadblock, another bump in the road for anybody that found it difficult to get to the polls. Once you've requested your absentee ballot, you will have an absentee ballot for all of the elections unless you happen to move and need to re-register your address, in which case you'd have to apply again. But basically, the whole application process is can be cumbersome for some people. And once we've applied, it would mean that it would continue. For example, I was helping a woman that I knew that didn't speak English very well, and she wanted to vote, and she didn't know if she had requested a ballot or not. And so we had to go through and find out whether she had or had not requested one. Secure drop boxes. I don't know if you've probably heard in the news that a lot of people are trying to actually remove drop boxes from areas, so it becomes more difficult for people to cast their absentee ballots. This would require a secure drop box in every community of over 15,000 citizens that are voting. That way people would have access and would not have to have it so difficult to depend on the mail system. Again, the mail system, if you don't mail your ballot 2 or 3 weeks ahead, it may not arrive in time. And we encourage everybody to take their absentee ballot and take it directly to a drop box, a secure drop box, or directly to the clerk's office when we talk with them. Audits. Right now, this requires that audits have to be conducted by public, state, county election officials. And it has to be based on guidelines, specific guidelines that promote accuracy and transparency. The audit has to be a very accurate, transparent, and public action. It can't be something that's behind the scenes. And this one I love. It says that you would have 9 extra days of early in-person voting, where you would be able to go to the clerk's office and you would be able to vote in person 9 days early. What that does is gives people that want to vote in person, make sure that they're not, voting absentee, but want to actually be able to go and vote. 2 weekends to do that. I know a lot of people that really want to take their kids with them when they go to vote, and that's impossible for them. They like their children to see them supporting democracy. And so in addition to people that need support for getting there, it would give them that extra opportunity. When we have the Board of Canvassers, and all the controversy that's been happening about the Board of Canvassers certifying an election, this constitutional amendment would say that the Board of Canvassers are only allowed to certify election based on the official record of the votes cast. They would if the votes cast have been certified locally, then the Board of Canvassers would have to then certify them. They could not be messing around with that. And people could not then be calling them and telling them to vote no on the certification. So I hope I've convinced all of you that this is a very, very important constitutional amendment. I hope that we can get you to support Prop 2. We need all the help we can get. I'm right now looking for people that will help me go out and door to door and canvass and explain to people what this amendment is all about. Also, social media. If you use social media, please help us that way. We're pretty sure we're going to end up with some kind of a lawsuit. So we're going to need donations because people sue us no matter what, no matter how good it is. I think, as you know, with the redistricting, there were all kinds of lawsuits that were cast against the organization before we were able to finally move forward. So if you have any questions at all, you can go to any of these sites, or you can contact me directly. I'll put my contact information into the chat so that you can either call me or email me or any way you'd like if there's some information that you would like. And I'd like to just open now to any questions that you have.
Hi, Rochelle. I think we have one question from the audience. And that is, could you talk about how do you feel that some people are opposed to Proposal 2 for the reason that they believe it makes voting less secure or could make it easier to tamper with our elections? What's your answer to that?
Well, so far, there's been no evidence that anybody has tampered with our elections. There have been multiple audits. We had, I think, something like 200 in this state because they were demanded so many times. And they were done in a bipartisan way. There hasn't been any evidence of anyone tampering with our elections. The people that say that really don't want people to vote by absentee. They believe that because we provide more accessibility to voting, then more disenfranchised communities will have the opportunity to vote. People that are maybe are working, people that are unable to drive to the polls. And so the fact that we're trying to make it more accessible to voting, people then say, oh, if you're really allowing everyone to go vote, then it's less secure. There's nothing less secure. We still require voter ID. For your absentee ballot, your signatures are still checked very, very carefully. That's why they need so many volunteers to help count the absentee ballots, because all of that has to be checked. We have many, many ways of double checking on everything. So this isn't going to make it less secure. What it's going to do is allow people to have difficulty getting to the polls. It's going to also make the lines at the polls shorter. So, for example, if people can go 9 days early to the clerk's office, show them their ID, then they wouldn't need an absentee ballot, which a lot of people would prefer anyway, and the lines would be shorter and the clerks would have less absentee ballots to count. So in many ways, it's going to help it become more secure, because if there's less chaos going on in terms of counting absentee ballots, you can certainly do a much more accurate job of being sure you're doing it without error. I'm not saying there can't be an error, but we have not found fraud. We have not found anybody that's actually intentionally trying to manipulate Michigan's system. I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, but basically people that complain about the security, number one, they're saying that the affidavit, if a person signs that affidavit, it's perjury. And it's also subject to a huge fine. And we check those signatures. So people are acting like, well, anybody can go in, no ID, and then they can just sign any old piece of paper. Therefore, it's not secure. That's not actually true. It is secure.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. It looks like there's one more question from the audience before we move on to the other panelists. The question is, and we may need some clarification on this, but it asked, what were the lawsuits for?
Oh, back with the anti-gerrymandering, it was all kinds of things. They were saying that, that people didn't have a chance to have a voice, and there was just all kinds, whatever they could come up with. All of them were denied. None of them even went to trial. but it still costs money. So the idea is to really cause as much disruption as possible to sort of bankrupt the organization so they can't really do what they need to do. But none of the lawsuits that were put forward went anywhere. That people hadn't had a voice, that it was a lot of them that you've heard, for example, people say even now, oh, these ballot proposals are too confusing, no one can understand them, or they're too complicated, no one can understand them. And I think you can see that there's nothing really complicated. It has a number of different elements to it, but essentially it's all about making voting more accessible and keeping it secure.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. And then we'll also, for folks, if other questions on Proposal 3 come up while we're moving through the presentation, we'll have some time at the end for some additional questions. So next, it is Chelsea White-Hoglen. She's the Deputy Organizing Director with Vot-ER, and she has a background in social work as well. And Vot-ER is working to integrate civic engagement into healthcare. She's going to share a bit about the organization and what work that they are doing right now.
Thanks so much, Merissa, and thanks to all of the Michigan social workers for having us today. I believe my screen should be popping up. Perfect. For those of you who might not have heard of Vot-ER before, might not be familiar with us, we are a national nonprofit that is working to connect healthcare institutions and providers with nonpartisan resources and training to be able to integrate civic engagement as an intervention and prevention tool among the services that are provided. And since our founding in 2019, we have built partnerships with a collection of hundreds of phenomenal partners like Get Waivers, Opioid Recovery Team, the National Association of Community Health Centers, multiple state chapters of the NASW, and collectively all of our providers, institutions, and partners have prepared more than 50,000 voters for civic engagement since we first started using our tools in 2019. There are so many tools that are available to us as social workers and healthcare providers that we can use to support our clients and communities when it comes to achieving lives that allow them to thrive. And voting is just one of those tools, but it's a powerful one. And we're going to dig into some of the research that shows that our communities are healthier when voters have access to the self-determination, the autonomy, and the connectedness that come from participating in the democratic process. So why does Vot-ER even think that voter registration belongs in healthcare and human services? Well, when we look at the group of voters who make up the population that's unregistered or unlikely to participate in the democratic process, that group of voters or group of people includes more than 51 million people in the United States of America, which, just for reference, is the equivalent of the entire population of Spain. And we also see that that same group of people shares a stark overlap with the folks who are historically marginalized by our health system and services setups. Folks who are likely to experience mental health struggles and challenges related to substance use, folks that are young, low income, folks of color, et cetera. And we know that in the interactions that social workers in particular and healthcare providers are having with our clients, we're developing a unique therapeutic relationship that allows us to serve as trusted messengers in regards to providing accurate information about civic engagement. And with that comes an awesome opportunity for bringing potential voters into the electorate who otherwise would be excluded from the democratic process. So a good way of imagining how elections that ultimately result in underrepresentation of marginalized voices can also lead to negative health outcomes for those same disenfranchised communities is by imagining a stream of water. Upstream, structural determinants at the tippy top of the mountain, where the source of the stream is on our screen, those structural determinants are the decisions that are being made by elected leaders and the policies that they pass. These decisions can lead to health inequities that are often referred to as the root causes of a lot of health issues. So let's think about the current opioid crisis as one quick example. There were recently huge cases against major opioid manufacturers that were settled in court. And those settlement funds from those legal cases will be distributed to state and local governments who were involved in the cases. And the elected officials who are voted into office this year will likely be the ones who decide how to spend that money, determining the structural implications of that funding. They could spend it on things like social services that might contribute to preventing substance use. They could spend it on alternative pain management approaches for the community, or they can decide to spend it on things like criminalization or harm reduction or Narcan distribution, and on and on and on. So the social determinants of health are represented by the town and the river that flows through it in the middle of our screen. The social determinants are the social outcomes that result from those structural and political determinants, those decisions that were made at the top of the mountain. These are the conditions and environments that people live and grow up in as a result of the decisions that are made upstream. So once an elected official decides how to spend the settlement funding, the social determinants will be shaped by how that money is spent. Is the money spent on creating social conditions that prevent substance use, like increasing housing access, increasing education, and so on? Or is it being spent on creating social conditions that don't show evidence of decreasing risk of use and injury from use? And finally, all the way at the bottom of the stream, where our river flows into the ocean as a result of those social conditions shaped by the structural determinants, this is where we see the health outcomes of our clients. Some effects at this level can include higher or lower rates of overdose, higher rates of incarceration, more trauma, ER visits from health complications due to unsafe substance use, and so on. And so in order to prevent those negative downstream health outcomes, we need to make sure that the voices of the directly impacted communities and the communities that we serve are being heard in the democratic process at the top of the mountain. And research shows that voting and health outcomes are super connected at every level of our human system. On the micro level, the individual level, research shows that when individuals participate in the democratic process, those same individuals also report improved health outcomes. One international study of 44 countries saw that civically engaged patients are consistently associated with better self-reported health, regardless of cultural or socio-political differences. Other studies have found that when individuals stop participating in civic engagement, their health scores decline in the years following their decline of civic engagement. On the mezzo level, social workers are all too familiar with what it's like to face systemic barriers when trying to provide our clients with the care and services that they need and deserve. And that's a huge component of the compassion fatigue and burnout experienced in our field. Engaging with patients around civic participation has been an outlet for providers to make a positive impact for our most vulnerable community members. Half of the providers who were surveyed by Vot-ER said that incorporating civic engagement into their practice helped prevent their workplace burnout, and 81% said that doing this work made them feel more hopeful in their own work. And finally, on the most zoomed out macro level, we see that policies that more effectively solve public health problems are more likely to be implemented when vulnerable populations participate in civic engagement and when voters turn out in larger numbers that are more representative of the broader population. Not only are the effects of voter turnout beneficial, but they're substantial. Research shows that expanded turnout to include marginalized populations has the potential to increase the amount of money going into public support programs by up to a third. So imagine if all of our agencies could just add 30% of whatever their current funding is on top of whatever they currently have. And then imagine if all of the agencies across the nation were able to expand their resources in that same way. And perhaps most importantly, what we're seeing in this graph is that voters who are engaged in voting by a nonprofit where they receive other services, those voters have the largest turnout advantage when compared to voters in the general electorate who maybe get approached by political campaigns if they get approached at all. And in particular, when nonprofits reach out to our patients of color, those community groups had dramatic improvements of voter turnout and the largest turnout advantage overall. And not only is this intervention effective, it's expected of social workers. I think it's easy for us to forget how deeply integrated the macro lens and approach to social problems is in our field, which is what makes it unique. And so I wanted to pull out some of the key statements from our professional code of ethics to illustrate how doing this work and integrating civic engagement into our practice is literally our job, no matter what setting we work in, clinical, bureaucratic, or something else entirely. And ignoring the role of the civic process in catalyzing and maintaining social problems experienced by our clients denies an entire scope of evidence-based intervention opportunity. Civic engagement is a critical aspect of meaningful participation in decision-making for the communities that we serve. And it also represents a way to form relationships to our communities and the shared impacts and experiences that we can overcome collectively. So Vot-ER is working to make it super easy for social workers and professionals at all levels of the health system to incorporate civic engagement into their practice by providing compliant, safe, and nonpartisan tools like individual badges and digital posters and patient handouts and conversation starters that professionals can use to engage their clients and community members with the civic engagement tools without intervening in the flow of services. Clients engage with these tools in one of three ways. They can use the camera on their smartphone to scan a QR code. They can use any cell phone, even like an old Motorola, to text a short code, or they can use any device, phone, tablet, computer, etc., to visit the web URL that's on the materials. And when they do these things, they're brought to a landing page where they have everything that they need in one place to register to vote, to request a mail-in ballot, or to learn more about where and how to vote in their area. And one of the questions that we get asked a lot is like, what if patients have questions about voter registration that I can't answer? And that's what the helpline button is for on the landing page, so that patients can have a live conversation with someone and they can ask all the questions they might have about the registration process, about voter ID, whatever comes up for them. The idea is for the Vot-ER platform to guide voters through the process of registering and getting ready to vote, so that social workers and providers who use our tools have one super easy task: just point the client to the platform at some point during the visit. And I know I'm coming up on the end of my time, so I just want to close out my part of this presentation by letting y'all know that all of our tools are always free through our website. And I want to invite you to order a Vot-ER badge for yourself to use with your clients, classmates, and community members. And I would love to invite you to sign up for more information about the Healthy Democracy campaign, which is a civic engagement challenge that we host with social work schools using our tools across the nation in March as part of Social Work Month. And signing up isn't making a commitment. It's just a way for us to get you more information that I don't have time to share today. So thanks again so much, y'all. And I will turn it back over so that we can hear from our other panelists.
Thanks so much, Chelsea. Before we move forward, there were a couple of questions that I think I don't want to lose that are directed specifically at Vot-ER. So first question is someone in the audience, they joined Vot-ER, but they've been nervous about having these discussions with people, and they're wondering if there's someone that they can talk to, if they can get some coaching so that they can feel more comfortable having these conversations.
Yes, absolutely. I want to make myself available, but we also do have an organizer specific to Michigan who you are more than welcome to connect with. And I am going to drop the email address for that person in our chat so it can be shared with y'all. And would love to have you reach out, and we're happy to meet with you one-on-one and even have ongoing conversations about challenges that might come up or questions that might come up.
Okay, great. And then final question is Vot-ER partnered with Michigan State Psych Hospitals Administration? And the question is because many patients in psychiatric hospitals don't understand that they still retain their right to vote via absentee while hospitalized, even if it's involuntary.
That is such a great question. And I don't know the exact partners that we have on board because there's hundreds. But I think that is something that I definitely want to bring back to our partnerships team so that we can make sure that we're building in some intentional outreach in that regard. Thank you so much for raising that.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. We'll still try to have some time for questions at the end too for folks if more questions come up for Chelsea. We're going to move along to Sue Smith. She is the Vice President of Advocacy for the League of Women Voters. She's going to talk a bit about what our voting rights are right now, what you need to know for the election, and why voting is also so important and empowering. So Sue, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thanks, Merissa, and hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Sue Smith, and I'm Vice President for the League of Women Voters of Michigan. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose either candidates or parties. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. The League recognizes our democracy depends upon the meaningful participation of all people. Voting is certainly an important way to participate. In fact, broad participation in the voting process is crucial to our democracy. The League is committed to removing barriers that prevent eligible Michigan citizens from exercising their right to vote. That is why we are working for and supporting Proposal 2, Promote the Vote 2022. The League empowers voters by providing them with nonpartisan information so they can make informed decisions when they vote. So here's some of that information. Voter registration. It's not too late to register for the upcoming November 8th election. But there are two important things to keep in mind. Number one, you must go to your city or township clerk's office to register. And number two, you must bring proof of residency, such as a utility bill. Also, it's not too late to vote absentee. In Michigan, all eligible voters may vote absentee, but you must apply for an absentee ballot. This close to the election, it's best to go to your city or your township clerk's office to fill out an application for an absentee ballot. You can vote your absentee ballot at the clerk's office, or you can take it home and bring the completed ballot back to the office later. In fact, many clerks provide a drop box. Be sure that you sign the ballot envelope with your official signature. It will be compared with your signature that is on file from when you registered to vote. Do not depend on the mail to get it there in time. All ballots must be received by the clerk no later than 8 p.m. on election day. Every election, some ballots are rejected because they were not received by the 8 p.m. deadline. Well, where can you get information on these candidates and the ballot proposals? Whether you choose to vote absentee or in person on election day, you can find helpful nonpartisan information on the candidates and the 3 statewide ballot proposals on the League's online voter guide at vote411.org. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions anyone might have about the coming election.
Thank you so much, Sue. I know that this question was asked and answered in the chat, but just because I think it's so important so that we can drive it home, I'm wondering if you can share if folks on election day or up until election day, they see signs of harassment or intimidation, posting false hours, tampering with the election, volunteers not respecting rules or keeping distances at the polls, what should they do?
Well, we're very fortunate here in Michigan to have a very robust election protection team and plan. And there is a phone number that you can call to report these kinds of problems. I'm sorry, I wasn't anticipating that question, so I don't have that phone number in front of me. But if you would like to contact Merissa, I'm sure she has that information as well.
Yeah, so folks on election day, if you're seeing signs of that, you can call. We'll get that phone number for you. There is an election protection hotline number that's universal, that's monitored by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights that we can get for you. So we'll make sure that we get that in the chat. I think we're bringing everyone else back together. Oh, great. Okay, Danielle mentioned that they posted that number in the chat, so everyone does have it close by. And Sue is right. We have a really robust election protection program here in Michigan. So now that we've brought Chelsea and Rochelle back in, happy to take questions from the audience. I think I'm not seeing any new questions at this moment, so I'm going to take the opportunity to ask one myself. Rochelle, maybe this is more directed at you, but hoping you could talk a bit about what is the risk if Proposal 2 does not pass in November?
Thank you. That's a very, very important question. If Proposal 2 does not pass, then the Secure My Vote petition would go to the legislature. If the legislature continues to be supportive of limiting voting rights and they pass that, which now they have enough signatures to do, it would become law. And we would have that would immediately become law with the governor not being able to even veto it. It would also leave us open to any other kind of legislation that might, in fact, limit absentee ballots, accessibility. For example, one of the things that Secure My Vote was trying to do was make it that you not only had to apply every year for an absentee ballot, but for every election. And in that application, you had to include in the application, which anybody, this is not a secure document, the application would have to include your social security number, the last 4 digits of your social security number, or your driver's license number. Now, as you know, a lot of people are very hesitant to put their social security number or their driver's license number on a document that they don't have control over where it goes in the mail. And, because if you put that in the mail, who knows who's going to actually get your driver's license and number, social security number. They say, well, it's only the last 4 digits. But in fact, those last 4 digits are the identifier, because the other digits are tied to where you got your social security number and your name. So if someone gets the mail and gets that application, they would have your social security number. And why would you require that in an application? To discourage people from actually even applying. So it's a case of the legislature being able to pass laws now that the governor can't veto, that would put all kinds of roadblocks in. Another thing that they wanted to put into one of those laws was that our clerks could not accept any donations. That's something, by the way, that Prop 2 also includes. It says that the county clerks can accept nonprofit donations as long as there's transparency and they're used appropriately. You have to be transparent about it. But for example, that would have meant that churches would not be able to use as voting sites because that is donated, unless the clerk paid for the exact same amount of money that the church might be charging for a wedding or for anything else. Again, limiting access to voting for communities that tend to depend on churches, which, as we know, tend to be a lot of our communities of color. And so it's many, many ways that this constitutional amendment will make it so that people cannot write laws anymore that could be passed without the governor, for example, that would restrict voting accessibility and voting, and I would even say voting security in terms of harassment. I hope that answered the question. If I didn't, please follow up with another question.
That was great. Thank you so much, Rochelle. So another question from the audience is hoping one of you can touch on how voting is a racial justice issue. And I think a similar question along that vein too, if could address both at the same time. How is voting healthy for the Black community?
I would be happy to continue with that, because it goes very much to what people are trying to prevent when they restrict voting accessibility. Just the fact that when they say they don't want to have as many, if you've been listening to the news, the places they try to restrict drop boxes are in communities of color. The communities they want to restrict voting access, so that, for example, they wanted to make it so that the Secretary of State could not send out applications without the application being requested directly. And so right now, the Secretary of State can send out the application to everybody so that you don't have to go online and request it. Who's going to have more trouble going online to request that? Again, either communities that of elderly people, communities where people don't have access to easy internet. The effort is to basically limit access to voting for any of those people that are marginalized and who already have issues. So yes, it is a racial justice issue. We go back to a long history of people trying to limit the access of to voting of people of color, going all the way back to not even being allowed to vote at all, or harassing people at the polls. That's not something new. Going out to the polls with going out and making sure that people don't want to stand in line because somebody's standing there in line with a gun hanging off his back. I mean, this is something that right now there's no law against someone just standing there. So yes, it is a social justice issue.
I'm happy to also add to this if it's helpful. I think
Please.
that so I've worked in political campaigns before and have experienced my own level of burnout and disappointment and resentment, honestly, towards the way that I think that the political process plays out and the lack of accountability there is behind elected officials and the campaigns that they run. And I think part of this is connected to the way in which right now there's like sort of a vicious feedback loop that happens around political campaigns. So when elected officials or candidates, I should say, are running for elected office, they have a limited amount of resources that they are using to run their campaign. And so if they only have so much money, enough to say, let's talk to 30% of the voters in the area that they're running to represent, what ends up happening is they decide to spend that money talking to the folks who are going to take the least amount of effort. So they end up talking to voters who are already registered, who are likely to turn out, et cetera. And so then the folks who already might experience barriers to voting, maybe don't have access to as much information, et cetera, those folks don't get talked to by a campaign. They end up sitting out the election and they end up having a score assigned to them literally internally as far as like elections data goes as a low turnout voter. And so when the next election cycle happens, that because of that score, we wash, rinse, repeat the process and elected officials don't talk to those folks. And because elected officials know that they're not even going to be worried about talking to those people when it comes to winning their reelection, they're not actually worried about delivering on promises that they think aren't going to make a difference in that top 30% of voters or however many that they can afford to talk to. And so when we think about communities, whether it's Black, Latinx, Native American, young, disabled folks who face the most persistent voting barriers, who don't get engaged with by elected officials outside of the campaign process, who don't really have the chance to have adequate representation, those same community groups bear the brunt of illnesses that are caused or exacerbated by social determinants of health, because our local and federal laws profoundly impact our health outcomes. And that holds for both health policies and as well as regulations that determine things like minimum wage, environmental protections, et cetera, which also directly affect our health. And so I would say that we are also nonpartisan. We don't support any one particular candidate. We support having a broader electorate that's participating in the democratic process so that we can facilitate a more appropriate process of accountability for elected officials, especially when they don't live up to their promises.
As we think about how we might reach out to those people who don't usually participate in voting, I think what you pointed out earlier, Chelsea, showing how people respond if nonprofits encourage people to vote. And I think the challenge is to help people who are not voting to see the link between their voting and the issues that they care about. and to help people to connect the dots, because otherwise people decide, what's the point? It's not going to make any difference as far as my life is concerned, and they're busy with dealing with challenges they might be facing in their own lives. So I think it's important for all of us who belong to nonprofits to find ways to reach out to people, and especially to use trusted messengers to reach out to their clients on the importance of voting and the difference it will make on the issues that they care about in their everyday lives.
Thank you thank you so much to the three of you. And I think, to drive all of your points home, it's no coincidence that in periods of racial progress in this country, that those periods have always been met with attacks on voting rights. And we saw that shortly after Obama was elected. We saw a unprecedented amount of waves across the country in state legislatures of voter suppression legislation after the 2020 election, when there were historic records of Black and brown voters turning out for the election, that was met with waves and waves of voter suppression bills also introduced in state legislatures across the country, including in Michigan, where we saw our own massive 38 bill package out of the Senate, all aimed at suppressing the vote. So recognizing that voting is power and attacking that seat of power is how this minority maintains control. And that's why it's so important for us to stay so vigilant, constantly in the face of voter suppression, and constantly be fighting for our voting rights, because that's what's at stake, our ability to continue to make forward progress in any way. So I'm wondering, I'm not seeing any more questions from the audience. I can give it a minute, but maybe in the meantime, is there any parting words any of you would like to give? If you could give one takeaway to the audience right now before we close out for the day, what would that be? And maybe I'll start with you, Chelsea. Let's start with you, Sue, and then we'll go to Chelsea and Rochelle.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you care about voting rights, vote yes on Prop 2.
I think for me, my parting words are, and also just to lift up what Allison is sharing in the chat, that civic engagement is way more than just voting. And voting, whether we choose as a collective to boycott the vote, or whether we choose as a collective to hold elected officials accountable in a particular way, I think that's the civic engagement piece. And I think that's the piece that we can't leave on the table as social workers when we are working with the folks who are impacted by, and we ourselves are often impacted by, the decisions of elected officials in a very tangible way.
Rochelle, any parting words for the group today? Any big takeaway you'd like them to go away with?
Yes. I think we have to understand that local elections are incredibly important now. In addition to Prop 2, school board elections, judges, we only have like less than 2 weeks left until the election. And as I go around and try to get people informed, I'm finding that many people do not know about the nonpartisan parts of the ballot, which are incredibly important. Even those people that believe in voting are not sure they know whether I vote yes or no on this, because they're just not clear. And then what they do, the default I've learned is, if I don't understand it, I vote no, or I leave it blank. And so sharing this information is what I guess is my parting words. If you understand it, if you can go on and share it either on social media, or if you're going to be having dinner with people, I wear my Vote Prop 2 button and my Vote Prop 2 t-shirt when I go to the gym. hoping that someone will say, what is that? And what do you do? Why are you wearing that? And what are you trying to do? I go out and walk in the neighborhood. I have my Prop 2 button on because I want people to ask me what it is. And I want to be able to be sure that everybody understands how important it is. So share the word with everybody, I guess, is my my final words. Many words.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I have just also a final parting that I'd like to share with everyone. I've asked Danielle to share michiganvoting.org in the chat for anyone who has questions after today about how to vote. If you have friends and family who have questions on how to vote, if they're facing some hurdles, I urge you to go to this website. It's a website it's a nonpartisan website. It's meant as a resource for everything you could need on knowing how to vote early absentee, what you need to know before you go to the polls on election day if you're voting in person. There are translated materials on there as well. And I think one final thing I'd love for everyone to know is because of the passage of Proposal 3 in 2018, there's almost no problem that we can't solve for an eligible voter up to and on election day where they can't where they wouldn't have the opportunity to vote. We can fix voter registration on election day. We can help get ballots in people's hands even on election day if they're facing troubles doing so. There's almost no problem we can't solve. So there are hotline numbers in there. If someone is having trouble, there's information that you can use to empower yourself, your friends, or your family. But again, voting right now is more accessible than it's ever been before. And there's folks around who are spending all of their time from now until election day trying to help folks navigate how to vote. So with that, I think I'm handing it over to Danielle, and thank you all so much for spending your afternoon with us in this final session.
Yes, thank you again to this amazing panel for closing out the educational portion of our conference with those important reminders. Voting is social work, and social work is political. I want to thank everyone again for joining us today for this year's Legislative Education and Advocacy Day Conference. A huge thank you again to all the presenters, moderators, and all of you. Thank you for engaging today in chat and for taking time to share your expertise and experience and helping to elevate the conversation for us all. We hope you will stick around to participate in the Career and Resource Fair to connect with the exhibitors that we have present. Thank you again to the University of Michigan School of Social Work, Western Michigan School of Social Work, Michigan State University School of Social Work, Therapy Today Counseling and Consulting, and SVSU Social Work Department for their support through sponsoring this conference. Please watch for a post-event email from me with a link to the evaluation. We'll also be dropping it in the chat section. As always, please do not hesitate to reach out to the staff with questions or concerns. Thank you again, everyone. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. We'll see you over in the Career and Resource Fair. Thank you.